Hi there everyone, this is Mark Stutman coming to you from Folkway Music up here in Canada. I have with me today this very interesting guitar. It is called a Prairie State Model 425 and it's by Larson of Chicago, built in around 1931. And it's kind of comparable to a Martin 0028 in that it's a 15-inch wide Grand Auditorium 12-fret model. Made out of Brazilian rosewood and red spruce, maybe white spruce, with X bracing in a long scale. But that's where the similarities really end. This guitar is much thinner than a comparable Martin or Gibson guitar. Larson guitars were often skinny. This is 3 1/4 inches deep at the bottom here, which is 3/4 of an inch or an inch deep, less deep than most other guitars of this size from that era. It has different bracing too. It's an X-brace guitar, but there's more finger braces and such. But more notably, the braces themselves, instead of being solid spruce, long solid spruce things, are vertical laminations of spruce, rosewood, and spruce. The main braces, the X-brace and the tone bars, which was designed to impart more strength to the braces so the tops didn't distort. Which is true. These guitars don't really ever have distorted tops. They're very, very strongly built. What you'll notice immediately are these metal rods that are inside the guitar. This is a feature that makes Prairie State guitars famous. Most Prairie States have these rods. Most other Larson-built instruments from this period don't. It was a feature on Prairie State. You'll see them every now and then on a Mauer too. And why? Why do they have these rods? Well, so Prairie State, Larson, in their marketing for this brand, used a lot of hyperbole in trying to sell the instrument with these interesting features. Keep in mind, in the early 30s, late 20s, people were just using steel string guitars for the first time, and manufacturers weren't really sure what the proper, set of ingredients were to making a good steel string guitar. And this was the Larson approach, at least with the Prairie State line. These laminated braces and these metal rods. Basically in their marketing they suggested that with the laminated braces and this patented metal rod technology, they were able to use thinner slices of wood for the top. And that would promote, a better sound. And these guitars sound really good. My patented riff. They're very loud, very clean, clear, fundamentally focused, tons of headroom. You can really dig in with a heavy flat pick and make a lot of noise with these guitars. They're very good sounding guitars, very round. Age has done good things to them. What they don't sound like is a very lightly built guitar. And if you've watched my videos over the years, you've seen me talk about very lightly built, early 30s Martins and Gibsons, which had very thin tops and very light bracing, etc., etc. Well, if you measure the top and back thickness on this Larson, it's very much exactly the same as every other guitar from around 1931. The top average thickness is about 105 thou, maybe it goes up to about 110 in places and as low as 90 in others, but it averages. I think they were shooting for about 1/10 of an inch, and that's pretty normal, but it also has this crazy heavy bracing in there, and these metal rods. So a light build it's really not, but that really has worked in its favor when you tack on 90 years of life to the instrument. They are very unique and very different than a Martin or a Gibson. But let's talk about these rods here and what they're about and how they might make resetting the neck on this guitar a bit of a challenge, and regluing the bridge, etc. That's what I just finished doing, and it was a bit of an involved job. There's no question. This was one of the more involved neck resets I've had to deal with in a long time. Not the most difficult, but certainly one of the most involved. And it was because of those crazy rods that are in there, among other things. So my thinking about these rods, you'll see there's two of them. There's that big thick rod here, and then further down there's the skinnier rod, which is in fact attached to this right here. This is like the top of a hanger. It's bent. The end of this rod is right here, and it bends over, and then it goes all the way down, and it comes out to here, where this combination nut / strap button screws on to the threaded end of that long rod. So this rod here is pulling the neck heel down this way, and this bigger rod is glued in between the head block and the tail block. It's sort of, there's holes drilled in there, and the rod just fits right in there on both sides, and it's filled with high glue, and it can't come out unless you cut the rod, which of course I'm not going to do in the process of a neck reset. So it stays in place, but this rod can come out. And those rods, when you look at them, and you've looked at other instruments in your life, are strangely familiar to these rods on a banjo, which were also invented sometime around that period. These are called coordinator rods, and their job is to attach the neck to the rim. And this rod right here terminates, the inner rod terminates at this end of the rim, and then screws into this neck bolt right over here. And this rod goes through the rim and terminates right over here. Their job is to keep the rim round and to not have, because there's no support here, there's no bracing across the back of a banjo, to stop the rim diameter from changing lengthwise as string tension sort of pulls the neck back this way. That's what coordinator rods do. A lot of people use them erroneously to adjust the action on your banjo, but that's not what they're for. They're really just for stability. You can tweak the neck angle somewhat, but it's not advisable, so don't do that. But that's a different video. Anyways, I think the Larson team was aware of banjo construction and said, hey, that's kind of a cool idea. Let's try that in a guitar, and patented this design for a guitar with this top coordinator rod that basically stops the instrument from crushing this way from string tension, in theory. And this rod that goes to here stops the neck or the body from spreading this way, and the heel from moving this way. This had a nice effect in terms of neck gluing. It made a nice little clamp when you fit your neck. If you didn't do a terribly good job fitting the dovetail, you could rely on this to have your heel knot open up. But as I've told you, I've just reset the neck on this guitar, so this whole coordinator rod system, maybe it didn't do what it was supposed to do, because these guitars also need neck resets like almost every other steel string that's this age. To reset the neck on this guitar, of course, this had to come out first, which was fairly easy, and then you had to take the neck off. With Larson's, it's difficult to remove a neck, mostly because of the fingerboard extension. It's very thick here. There's the fingerboard, and then there's always a shim underneath the fingerboard. And so the thickness at the end of the fingerboard is 1/4 of an inch thick, and it gets to almost 3/16 thick at the middle. It's a very thick fingerboard, so when you're taking a fingerboard off and you're using heat, you have to use a lot of heat here, but there's lots of glue joints involved. There's binding that's susceptible to heat damage. So you generally don't want to use any heat. At least me, I don't want to use any heat when I take the fretboard extension off of one of these. So you have to be super careful that you don't damage the top underneath the fretboard. Then we use steam or heat needles or whatever you use to loosen the dovetail. But you also have to have seen a Larson dovetail before, because they don't share any similarity with a Martin or a Gibson dovetail in their dimensions, how wide they are here, and they don't actually, Larson dovetail doesn't go to the next fret, doesn't go to the 13th fret, it's a shorter dovetail. So you have to sort of know where to drill. Been there, done that. Anyways, the neck came off clean, that's great, and then fitting the neck is all normal. But then when you go to glue this neck back in, or before, sorry, there's one more step involved. When you fit the neck of a guitar, the whole neck angle changes. This metal hanger thing here relies on the placement of these holes that are here and here. And as you change the angle of the body and neck, those holes don't line up anymore as you cant the neck back. And so you have to sort of fudge things a little bit and make it all work. What also can't happen is that the neck can't move up or down this way in the pocket. it's also sort of almost flush right here. But basically the challenge with all that is that you end up having space underneath the fretboard extension that you have to fill with a shim. So this instrument, you can't see it, it's all blended in here, but underneath that black line there is another shim of ebony all the way around, and it's asymmetrical. I'm sure you can't see that from this angle, but it's thicker on one side than the other just because of how this guitar sort of aged and warped and moved and stuff. So that's a complicating challenge. The next complicating challenge is, how do you glue this back on with these crazy metal bars in the way? Normally you have a call in there and you stick a clamp in there, but I had to make special calls that fit inside this guitar that were around, sort of made space around this bar to be able to clamp everything together. And then I had to glue the neck. I had to get this on clamps and get this thing on and in place while the hide glue was hot. So you have to work really quick. Anyways, it was a lot of forethought that went into the gluing of this guitar back together, and thankfully it all worked and it came together well. I also had to re-glue the bridge on this guitar, which was complicated because of this. You can't even put your hand in there. Normally we use bolts through the pinholes to bolt a bridge down, but I can't get my hand into this guitar to tighten bolts. So I had to make another interesting jig to inside the guitar for clamping. And then because the bridge has this crazy angled top to it, when you clamp, if you clamp something that's wedged, it tends to spit the thing that way. So I had to make this crazy apparatus that held the bridge exactly where I wanted it to without bolts, so it didn't swim forward when it was under clamping tension with wet glue. Anyways, that worked too. So hey, right on. And there it is. It's done. The last crazy thing about this guitar is it's a really clean and original Larson, with the exception of that pickguard, and it had almost unworn frets, but they're the original frets to the guitar, and they're a unique fret size and shape that doesn't exist anymore. They're 51 thousandths wide and 44 thousandths tall, which is a fret wire that you just can't get. And they're fretted nicely inside the binding, and they were perfect. But the guitar needed a refret because the fretboard was kind of lumpy around, and I wanted to get it perfect. So I took the frets out carefully and planed the board, and then I reinstalled the original frets back in the board, and they went really nicely. And so now the guitar has original frets and its original pins, original nut. I've made a new saddle. That's what you have to do when you do a neck reset. But now it's off to the races, and it's a really cool sounding guitar. Very focused, clear, and fundamental. Very loud. But it's sort of got this explosive response to it that if you just hit it softly, it's very immediate to respond. So it has a lot of dynamics too. Not a dark, smoky, open, warm guitar, sort of like nothing like a Brazilian Nick Lucas or something like that. And very different than a Martin 0028 from the same era. But a great guitar nonetheless in its own sort of way. It does its own thing. And a really comfortable contemporary neck carve. It's still 1 7/8, but it's very round and full, and the neck doesn't feel like a 1 7/8 neck. Anyway, so that's what a Prairie State is all about. And if you ever are tasked with taking the neck off or re-gluing the bridge, give it a lot of thought before you take the job on, and definitely if you're quoting the job, leave a lot of room for the discoveries and jigging up for a new process. They're very interesting things. Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll catch you around next time. Have a good day. Take care.